You double the team or you got a bunch of AI happening, and yet things don't seem to be really moving all that faster. Maybe you're spewing out code faster, but when it comes to getting your objectives done, reaching what you ought to achieve, things seem to be moving all about the same. Oftentimes, this is something that people sense yet are afraid to speak up about. And that's because you did something wrong. You thought that getting more people on the team or getting more and more AI involved would actually help you. But the root of the cause is that without the proper structure, without the proper guidance, these people cannot work any faster. You and your leadership team become a chain of bottlenecks, and all you got by adding more people into the team is usually just a longer line of people waiting outside your office to grab you the second you're out from one meeting and going to the next. You need to learn how to create proper force multipliers in order to allow your team to grow and work much faster without you having to do a bunch of hand-holding or being the puppet master all day long. In this video, we'll tackle exactly that and see how you can turn that mess into something that's a lot more productive by taking on principles and things that are field tested that I've seen in many startups in the past that got them past that point and allow them to get into healthy growth and allow them to become faster as they matured as opposed to ossify. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive coach and consultant, and I help people just like you create teams worth leading, because that's too short to lead a mediocre team. Let's get to it. To untangle this mess, let's go over a few things that I think you need to have installed in your organization in order to set yourself up for success. Number one is cut it with the zero-sum games. A lot of the times as we're starting the growth of an organization, the first thing we reach to is to give people responsibilities in a way that actually harms the future growth of the organization. So the first 1, 2, 3 engineers end up being, hey, that's the head of front end, that's the head of architecture, whatever, and done. And what ends up happening is that we've split the organization into these fiefdoms. Anyone else that's joining later doesn't have the progress path. They cannot be promoted to anything because everything's already taken. They cannot help because that means they will be necessarily stepping on someone's toes. They don't see it as something that they're allowed to do because it's already someone else's job. So even if they have an idea, sometimes they just assume they're not supposed to speak up. Those people who already got the responsibility end up being bottlenecks because they're the only ones doing it. And while that may have worked when you only had a handful of engineers prior to AI, how is that supposed to stack up when you have dozens of engineers and God knows how many agents producing code? These are things that cannot keep happening. Even if you've made the mistake of creating these zero-sum titles, you need to undo it. You can still fix it. It's perfectly fine, even if some people don't like it at first. It's better having them get a bit pissy for a bit and you explaining the situation as opposed to trying to continue like that, because that's a no-go. So start by breaking the zero-sum game and ensure that you're giving people responsibilities in a way that allows you to keep growing. So it's not you're in charge of everything in architecture, but you're also in charge of architecture. Maybe you have a specialty in X or Y, but that does not mean that you will only and forever be the only one deciding about that. We can add more people, that's perfectly fine, does not take away from you, and allows us to keep growing the organization in a way that makes sense. And now notice that this actually signifies the core concept here, and that is any additional person needs to act as a force multiplier. Again, they need to allow us to unlock even more success in growing the organization, as opposed to being just a linear addition. If I'm hiring another person, I'm getting another pair of hands, and output will grow by the amount of clicking those pair of hands that pair of hands can do. Force multipliers is about making it possible to move even faster, and not just for that specific person, but to people working with them. That's how we get this compounding effect of velocity. And to do that, you have to keep in mind that your managers in the organization, the senior staff, your new hires, all ought to be given this objective. You will be a force multiplier. Your role is not just to clickety-clack fast, but to make things go faster, smoother, more impactful all around you. With that mindset, you will be able to move things faster and actually create an organization that gets better with time. Next, you want to ensure that you're allowing people to grow past just tech mastery, because there's only so far you can get with that, especially if we're looking at an entire organization. Often, what I really recommend is putting in place real good feature ownership. That's the perfect solution if you see that you and your managers are always overwhelmed, always have too many things on your plate, you're juggling too many things. If you allow people to have this agency, autonomy, this responsibility of being in charge of something, you're giving them place to grow, you're making them much more motivated, you're allowing yourself to have less bottlenecks, do more things at the same time, have people have more autonomy, use their potential better. It's just an amazing win-win-win. But you can't just do it without thinking about it. Just grab someone in the hall, say, hey, you're now the feature owner of whatever, and sayonara. No, you have to do it properly in order to allow them to grow into the force multiplier mindset. So for example, define what's feature ownership in your organization. I usually say that we have to keep in mind 3 things. And when I give people the feature ownership title, that responsibility, they have to ensure that they're pushing forward 3 different aspects. One is the tech mastery here, the tech ownership. So even if they're not the best engineer, the most experienced engineer in that specific case, they are the ones who are in charge of connecting the dots. If I need to get the input of some expert, of some architect, of someone from a different team, they're in charge of doing that and compiling the entire tech strategy, the tech approach for that big feature. That's fine. That's number 1. For most senior engineers, that's not really an issue. Number 2 is the product ownership, which does not mean that they become product managers, of course, even though I have a different video about the fact that you ought not to be waiting for product to spoon feed you any little decision. You ought to be a bit more in the gray area between engineering and product, but that's for a different video. In this video, what I want to focus on when we talk about feature ownership, product ownership, which is a subset of that, is about ensuring that you know how to communicate with your product counterpart. You look at what you're building, you understand the why behind it, you understand the context, you understand what we're doing, the different trade-offs, you speak up when it comes to talking to your product counterparts in order to ensure that whatever you're doing is the best thing to do, the thing that makes the most sense. All those are things that I'm betting only your managers do enough of, or even just you. Things escalate all the way to the top, which means that you all become bottlenecks. But proper feature ownership is about allowing your people to talk directly to their product counterparts and make some of those decisions together. Not everything has to escalate all the way up to you. Actually, very little actually has to. You need to create that sort of culture. You need to give people that responsibility, that ownership over product, managing the product relationship for that feature, which will make things that much easier. And lastly, we have the execution ownership, which is about everything operational and getting that thing done. Even if they're not managing people per se, they ought to be in charge of the different updates going on, if we need to have a status update, an email update, updating dashboards, knowing which people in the organization we depend on, we need to be in sync with, we need to do things together, ask them to do something, send it to me, etc. All of that execution stuff that, again, I'm assuming you and your managers are the only ones doing nowadays, can also be part of feature ownership, making those people, your senior staff, that much more valuable. They become feature owners who are actually force multipliers by allowing them to take that sort of responsibility, having those broad shoulders. You can rely on them, you can have more things going on in the organization, and all of a sudden you can do a lot more with those people you already have. That's the secret sauce here. And lastly, try to find a way to create force multipliers also all over the organization, which usually is what I recommend doing when it comes to tech capital. Tech capital, as opposed to tech debt, is about finding things we can do in the organization to give people some extra leverage. for your people within engineering. A lot of times it's just tooling, developer velocity, that sort of stuff, engineering velocity, developer experience, yada, yada, yada. You know that stuff, I'm sure. But now with AI, it just, I cannot fathom an engineering organization that doesn't find the opportunity to help people all around. Can you do things to make others in the organization become force multipliers and allowing them to work much more efficiently? Look at your team. Are you constantly being dragged to help marketing set up this, set up that? Can you create a tool so they do it? They can now run it by themselves. 80% of the time, they no longer need engineering. Boom. They now have this force multiplier. They can now do things by themselves. They can allow themselves to run many more experiments because they no longer have to run things through you, wait for it to be prioritized, etc. Can you do the same when it comes to how sales access all sorts of data that they need, customer success running all sorts of reports, whatever that comes to you, or even if it doesn't come through you, but you understand that your peers in customer success, for example, are taking so long, painstakingly putting up a dashboard or statistics or collecting whatever issues they've got in the past month in order to understand what to do, and you care about it, you understand, you're like, yeah, let's shove it in an LLM and do it faster. If that's the case and you can create it for them, that means that you're creating these force multipliers all around the organization, making things that much more valuable, much more faster, and just the right thing to do in general. I think that if you take all of those, you will turn your organization from being focused on doing clickety-clack, doing the basic stuff in front of me, and realizing that our biggest impact is seeing how can we pull things together, help everyone around us be better. And that creates the compounding effect of positive, productive growth and maturity in an organization, again, as opposed to ossifying. I've seen startups that had less than 100 people, but had the culture vibes of IBM. And why? Because they had the exact opposite of everything we just described when it comes to giving people ownership, making them feature owners, making them actual force multipliers, and giving them the ability to have real impact, real agency, and not just go through the same bottlenecks all the time. You can do it differently. Your challenge for this video is to think about where you can start from the things we listed, find that first step and implement it. That's how you stop being a bottleneck. That's how you gain more time and you create an organization that can actually achieve many, many amazing things. That's it. If you have any questions or comments, my email's in the video description, or let me know in the comments. I always like to hear from you. And if you haven't yet, do like and subscribe. It really helps, and I'll see you here in the next video. Ciao.